Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor Live. I'm opening it up a little bit early today, so everybody has a chance to get online and log in. I see one comment. Rob is here in the chat. And let me just double check I can make the comments work correctly. There we go. Hey, Rob. He's in his man cave or his office, and I have my assistant in my office here. She's sleeping down here, the furry kind of assistant. And today we're going to be talking about, where's my title slide? How to do HDR panoramics. So I posted image that I had done in the DPM community recently, and I got to turn those notices off. And people were interested in how to do that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you are joining us for the first time, please let me know where you are joining from and how you found out about us. I'm just going to turn off my notifications so I don't keep getting bing, bing, bings. Awesome. Okay. Stephanie is here from the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Oh, no, I got to put the comments over here. Actually, let's put them up here. Funky new process. I can move stuff around with this new system. I love it. Last time I had a few glitches, but I think I've got it nailed. Marguerite, David. And yes, I will go over what I am going to be covering again today in a few moments. I'm giving a chance for everybody to get in here. Jim from Invermere. So basically all of our DPM community members, which is awesome. And I'd love to get a few more people here from the internet. So if everybody that's online goes and posts this to their own social media, maybe we can get a few more people joining us live. I'm just going to adjust my camera here for a second because I got too much space above my head. There we go. All right. I'm good to go. So yeah, everybody go invite one friend to come and we'll double our numbers. But I'm going to be talking about how to do HDR and pano at the same time. This is actually an email question that came in. So it's kind of a complex process because you have to know two different things. But what's everybody up to this week? Have you been photographing anything interesting? Wonder if I have some music to play or something while I got this background. I think there's music. Here, let me see. No, I just have like sound effects. Like that. But I don't have music. I'll have to add some music. There we go. How do I do the volume on that? I have no idea. There we go. All right. Learning new things as we go. Now I've got background music. Anybody up to anything exciting this week? What did I do this week? I went to an event on the weekend and did some photos. Still, that's too loud? Okay. How's that? Stephanie did something interesting. Went to a sunflower field to shoot the sunset. Review. Now you have to review 130 plus shots. That's not too many. I take that many like in an hour. You got this, Stephanie. Sheila got back from visiting Philadelphia, Valley Forge, and Gettysburg. Oh, cool. Yeah, we found that area very interesting. Lots of history for sure. Lee, too hot to go outside. Well, we've had a rainy day today, so we are indoors as well, but for a different reason. Stephanie also discovered that not all sunflowers follow the sun. It's great to see the sunflower faces with the sunset behind them. Oh, very cool. Very cool. Rob says we're ready to go. How many people do we have live here today, Rob? I'm going to pause the music and let's get started. Okay, I'm going to run through a little intro and then I'm going to be back with some slides. Let me set up my slides first. Still getting used to my new system here. So here we go. Yay, it worked. Okay. If those of you that were watching the live a couple of weeks ago, we haven't been live in 3 weeks, I think now. We didn't do one last week because we were away. And we've decided to sort of space them out a little bit more and cover more of a topic rather than a theme of certain kinds of photos. We're going to do more topics in terms of, we've done cropping, black and white, color. So this one came up, and I thought, okay, great, let's do this one. And I put together a few slides. So we're going to look at a few slides first, and then I'm just going to go right into giving you the editing tips. So we're going to give you some photography tips first, and then I'll give you the editing tips. Okay, so we're going to, there it is. There's my list. So I'll give you some shooting tips for both Pano and HDR, and to do them both. And then I'll show you the process for merging both HDR and Pano and an HDR Pano in both Lightroom and Luminar Neo. Okay. So first, let's take a look at HDR shooting. Okay. What do you need to know to photograph HDR? HDR, it literally stands for high dynamic range. I get that question a lot as well. What does HDR actually stand for? And that's what it means. And high dynamic range, or the dynamic range, is the difference between the light areas and the dark areas of your image. Okay, so a high dynamic range is one with high contrast. Okay, such as a scene like this. So this is one I photographed in Madeira in Portugal, where you've got a sunset and a backlit subject. Okay, so in order to get the light and the color in the sky, you have to underexpose, but then that leaves the subject and the landscape in a silhouette situation. Then if I expose on the other end of the scale to get detail in the darkest areas, the sky is blown out. Okay, so this is a perfect kind of scenario of when you would want to do HDR. Okay. If you expose in the middle, okay, and you have a scene that is super high contrasty, you're still going to be missing detail in the darkest darks and the brightest brights, okay, because your camera can't capture that huge range of data. Okay, so that's why we want to do brackets and merge them together. Okay. So the following images were made with that process of bracketing and putting them together as HDR. Let's take a look. Okay, here's that same scene bracketed. I think I took 3 or 4 images from the darkest to the lightest, merged them together using HDR software and deghosting because he moved a little bit. And this is what I came up with for the final image. So there's detail in both the darkest shadows of this valley down in here, and you can see the detail in the sky where the sun is, right? Here's another example. This is actually taken last week when we were away at a little cabin. We're working on planning a night workshop, and we also have a night webinar coming up next week. So Rob, if you want to please share a link to that in the chat. For the night webinar, we have signups. For those of you who are already in the community, you don't have to register again for the night webinar. You just join from the community. If you are not part of our community, you can sign up for the webinar until Monday for $19, right? So we took these last week, or I did, and then these are the bracketed images, and then the merged one is on the left. Here's another example. Nighttime, or towards the end of the evening, dusk, is another time that's great for HDR because now you've got the sky is dark and you'll have the opposite problem of the sunset. The sky will be maybe too dark and the land or the lights in the scene will be too bright, especially if you have like neon or something like that. Okay, so here's the brackets and the final image. That's our garden that Rob has created, by the way. Another example from Portugal. Here's another extreme example from dark to light. I took 5 bracketed images in this case and merged them together to create this one. Okay, so the step 1 is shooting HDR and making sure that you get it right in the camera first. Okay, the biggest mistake, and I'll come back to that later, is not getting enough images. Okay, so how you want to set up to shoot your HDR is, first of all, ideally use a tripod whenever possible and a remote so you can trigger the camera without touching it, or a 2-second timer if you don't have a remote. Secondly, set your desired aperture and use manual mode. If you're using auto bracketing, make sure that you always set it up in aperture priority, so you keep the aperture the same and only change the shutter speed. Okay, so if you're doing manual mode, only adjust the shutter speed and do that manually. Okay, if you're doing auto bracketing, set it in aperture priority mode so it stays on the same aperture. The problem is that if you change from one to the other and your depth of field is different, when you go to merge them together, something weird's going to happen. Okay, so you need to have the same focus and depth of field in all of the images. Okay. Set your ISO low if possible. Okay, the higher the ISO, the more grain you're going to get, especially when you're merging these things. Okay, use a white balance preset. Okay, so that's like daylight or shade or cloudy, not auto, because again, you want the color to be the same. You want the images consistently the same depth of field and the same color from one to the other. Okay. Likewise, lock the focus or use back button focus. Okay, so if your camera has that and you know how to set it, use that, because you want to make sure your focus is on the same point every time. Then, of course, take your series of bracketed images to capture the full range from dark to light. I recommend exposing your images 2 stops apart. Okay, I've seen people do it at 1 stop apart, and you can. Just means you have to take more images and put more images into your HDR software, which can bog it down if your computer is a little bit slow. If you're dealing with a blue sky, you might want 1 stop apart, but generally I find 2 stops apart is what you want. Okay. And finally, check the histogram. You're going to be looking at the darkest image and the lightest image specifically to make sure that you've captured enough range. For example, here we see an overexposed image where everything is pushed to the right, and you can see that the dark end of the histogram, there's a gap, meaning we've got lots of information in the dark areas on the overexposed image, and on the underexposed image over here on the left, you can see there's lots of data and space over here in the highlights, meaning we've captured everything we need. So your darkest image should look something like this, and your lightest image should look something like this. Okay, so take enough images to make sure that you captured the full range. Next, let's talk about panoramas. Okay, so panorama is something you're going to stitch together. Okay, how to set up for a pano? Again, the same thing. Use a tripod and a remote whenever possible. Again, this will help you steady the camera, but also when you're trying to get the images to align, which is the same with HDR, the less movement you have in the camera from one image to the next, the better. Okay. Set the exposure and keep it the same for the entire set of images. Okay, so note, I'm talking about a single image pano, so we're not talking about HDR panos yet. Okay, so if you have a scene that has a good exposure with one image, make sure the exposure is the same and consistent, because when you go to blend them or stitch them, if the exposure is off, you're going to have a line where they meet. Okay, so make sure your exposures are consistent. Okay, and orient the camera this way, vertically. I'll show you an example of why in a second. Okay, then I usually start on left to right. Take a series of images, overlapping them by about 30%. This came up in the community where somebody asked me a question about, how much I'm overlapping. They said they don't overlap that much. The reason for overlapping that much is that your stitching software needs the information so that it knows how to line them up like that. Okay. And if you have less than that, it's harder to line it up accurately. Okay. So 30% and just take more images. Okay. And you should have a set that looks something like this when you are done. Okay. So here's the first example where I shot the images horizontally. You can see the 3 images that I used at the bottom and the finished image at the top. So the final image after it was stitched is 8,800 pixels wide roughly, okay, by 3,150 roughly, right? You can also see that the exposures on the bottom are consistent, as is the color. So that's what you're going for, Okay, so if you're doing a single image pano like this or not HDR, okay, this is what you're looking for. Now let's compare that to what happens if I shoot the images vertically. Okay, so this one took me 3 images to get the scene I wanted, and the final image is 8,800 pixels wide. Look at the next one. I've taken 7 images here to make a final image, which is now 13,800 pixels. So it's quite a bit wider and the same height. See that? So 3,700 pixels high. Okay. It's even taller as well. So it's taller. Okay. Because I'm using the full height of the camera. And it's a lot wider. So if you wanted to print an enormous print of this, the resolution on this one is going to be better than on the other one. Okay. And you could see how much I've overlapped. I'll go over this when we actually look at the individual images, but take a look. What I'm looking for is, for example, the feature in one image, like this one over here. See this tree? Okay. Now you could see the tree here. Okay. Now I'm looking at, okay, here's this little deep shadow. Shadows over here. Okay, what do I see overlapping here? Okay, this bush is here. This rock, right, is here. This little rock here, and so on. Okay, so you always want to make sure you have enough features from one image to the next overlapping. Okay. Now to get to the deluxe version, which is how do you put all that together to do HDR and pano at the same time. Okay, so you want to follow the steps for a regular pano and orient the camera. But then instead of taking just one image, so in the example of the Grand Canyon, I would have taken 7 series of bracketed images. So if I was bracketing, let's say 3 images per scene, okay, I would have had 21 images to merge together, right? So you'll end up with a set that looks something like this. Okay, so this was a little itty bitty church that was on the site where we were staying with the cabin, and it's really tiny. Okay, like really tiny, and I couldn't get it all in with a wide lens. I had a 10mm lens, so I'm standing in the doorway, and the wall with the stained glass is literally on my left, and the other wall, the logs, is on my right, and the doorway itself is not that wide, like maybe 6 feet. Okay, so I took 3 different shots. Okay, you can see the first shot with the stained glass window and the other window on the right. Oops, over here. Okay, and then you can see that window here over on the left now. You can see the pulpit here, and finally the pulpit there and the right. Okay, now instead of just having one image like these middle ones here, I wanted more detail in both the shadows and in that window. So I wanted to get the windows not blown out. So I bracketed 3 sets times 3. Okay. Some things you want to watch out for. The biggest thing is not having enough images. I mentioned that earlier. Okay, so when you're bracketing, take more than you think you need. And I'll show you some sets where I did bracket and I didn't end up using them all, but it's nice to have them just in case. Okay, same thing with the panos. Okay, take more than you need, overlap a lot. Okay, it's better to have more than not enough, because if you have more than you need, you can always just discard them or not use them. But if you don't have enough, you'll end up with missing pieces of your image. Okay. And if you aren't sure, just take more. Okay. Bracket more and take more of your scene. Are you getting that point yet? Okay. Okay. So processing tips and tricks. We're going to move into the live demonstration now. So let me get over to my other screen here, and I'm going to start on Lightroom. And I should be able to see your notes now, Rob. Okay, awesome. Now I can see any notes that you want to send to me, and I should be able to see my Lightroom. So just let me get in here. Okay. Sorry, I just got to rearrange my own screen here. Okay, so I've got a number of different images. Before I get started, is there any questions about anything that I said in the slides that you would like me to answer for you? I'll give you a second here. Any questions? Nope. Cloudy and rainy day, Deb says, from Alaska. Okay, I'm just going to put the comments over here. I wonder if I can format that. Background. Trying to get the background formatted here. Let me just do that. Oh. Okay. Let's see. Stephanie says, does taking the photos in vertical reduce the distortion? No, using a longer lens does. Okay. So if you're using a slightly longer lens and take more images, you'll get less distortion than if you use like a fisheye, for example. Okay. So you can take multiples with a 50mm lens even and stitch them together as opposed to using a 10mm lens, and you'll get less distortion that way. Okay. So vertical just gives you more pixels to work with. Okay. Lee says, with more photos, do you have processing issues? You could if your computer is slow or gets bogged down. But worst case scenario, you could, if you're doing HDR Pano, you can also choose, you can do them all at the same time. And I'll show you merging it as HDR and Pano in one step. But if it gets too much for your computer, you can do the HDR merges first and then take the merged images into Pano and stitch them. So you can do it in 2 steps. Okay. Is the bracket before the stitching? So I'm going to show you that, Jim, because like I said, you can do both HDR and Pano in one step using both Luminar and Lightroom. They both have an HDR Pano stitching. How to avoid nodal. By that, I think you mean like the parallax error when you're doing your panos. You can get a panoramic tripod head that will do, fancy stuff to keep your camera to avoid that. I just tend to keep my tripod head straight and level so that as I'm shooting, I have the camera level. Okay. Lightroom, actually, Luminar is better at stitching panos than Lightroom is. And if you take, 50 images of a scene that are kind of all over the place, you can literally put those into Luminar and it will stitch them. Lightroom, not so much. Okay. What program do you have, Joe? Robert says, does the vertical pano work in Neo? Yes, it does. Yep, no problem. I've done both. Okay, so let's take a look then at doing some examples. Okay, so I'm going to show you an HDR merge first. So we'll just do a simple HDR merge first. Okay, so here's this little church that I used as my example. So you can see how tiny it is, like that's the size of a pew. So I took 3 images to bracket, and you could see that I shot them handheld. I didn't use a tripod because I was frankly lazy because I was on vacation. Okay. So I took 3 images because I wanted to get the detail in the windows. Okay. Can you see this right here? So if I turn on, bring these into develop, and I turn on my clipping warnings. Okay. So you can see here, there's only a tiny bit of stuff clipping in the windows here. Okay. So I could have taken another one that's even darker to make sure that I have the detail there. And then if I look at the next brighter one and the next brighter one, okay, now there's lots clipping in the white areas, but I've got full detail in the dark. Okay, so in the shadows, there's nothing clipping. So if I wanted to, I could actually fake a 4th image. I can make a virtual copy. So I'm showing you a little trick here. So I'm going to make a virtual copy, and I'm just going to move it over here. And with the virtual copy, I'm going to set my exposure to -2. Okay, so that's going to darken everything. And now you can see that it's minimized the clipping in the windows. Okay, maybe I'll even go not quite that much because I'm looking for detail in the windows. Okay, so now you can see there's detail in the windows. And now I can just grab these 4 images, even though I faked that one, and bring them into the merge portion of Lightroom. To do that, you're in the library module, right? And you just select the ones you want to use, right click, and choose Photo Merge HDR. Okay. Once the box comes up, you have a few options. Okay. You can auto align, which I have checked off here because I shot these images handheld. Even if I use a tripod, I still usually have that checked off because it will look for similar features and make sure that they're all perfectly aligned. Because if they're not perfectly aligned, you'll get ghosting and you'll get blurry and outlines and basically just get a mess. Okay. Ghosting, this overlay here, is turned on, and as you can see, there's no ghosting showing. If there was ghosting, we'll see that in another example. Ghosting is where something moved. So if you have like a plant maybe that's flowing or clouds in the sky that have moved, you'll get ghosting, meaning it'll show you a double image of that thing. And it'll show on here when this is turned on as a red outline, red mask, but there's nothing ghosting. So I'm just going to actually turn this off. I don't need to use that function. And I usually turn off auto settings as well, because what it's doing is it's doing auto develop for me, and I don't want that. So I want it just to merge the images for me, blend them together, and I will do editing from there. So once you're happy with how the image looks, you just click merge and it will bring you back a new image as a DNG, and it'll say HDR in the file name, but it's a 32-bit file. So because these are raw images, which are already like 16-bit, it merges them together and you have all the information from full range of tones from the darkest to the lightest, all in that one file. So it's a bigger image file as well. Okay, I see there's some questions. Does the new Neo have virtual photos? Not yet. So I can't, virtual copies are coming with the update in October, Robert. So they've announced that, but not yet. No, you don't need to edit the images before you merge them. And ideally, actually, the only thing that I apply is the camera profile or the lens profile. And on my Fuji, that's done automatically. So that's the only thing that I would apply ahead of time. So yeah, don't edit them. You can in Lightroom, but I don't, and there's no need to. Yeah, I see that my audio is out of sync. How do I fix that? Hang on, I've got an app for that. I think I've got an app for that. Now you're seeing, oh, no, hang on. Is that better? Am I fixed? Am I fixed? Test, test, test. Here, testing. How's that? Better? Okay. Marguerite said, is it possible to add a virtual copy of an image to the bracketed images shot for HDR? That's exactly what I just did, Marguerite. So I faked one. Yes. Okay, sound is good. All right. So I just forgot to have my audio. I got all these apps now. I got apps everywhere. Okay. All right. Back to my images. Okay. So now this is the new one that has been created. Okay. And you can see that it is a DNG format. Okay. So, and Lightroom adds the extension -HDR. And then you could take this into develop just like any other image, but you have a lot more data. Okay, so look at all this data. Okay, so we've got lots of data in the windows. Okay, if I try this with the single image, you're going to get missing detail. Okay, it won't go as far. So I am going to bring the highlights down. Right, and I'm going to give it some clarity. Like so, and give it a little more punch with the darkness. Clipping warnings. I'm seeing a little bit of clipping in the windows. Let's just bring that down a tiny bit more. And there we go. Okay, now I can do things like add an edge vignette and warm it up a little bit because it looks like it needs to look like wood color. There we go. Okay, so now you can see there's detail in these windows. So you can actually see that there's color and a pattern, right? They're like sort of frosted glass, right? Versus if we compare that to this image. So let's do that, okay? So here is the HDR one on the left versus the single image on the right. This is the one that was the 0 exposure. I don't know why this is not loading here for me, but come on, Lightroom. There we go. Okay, so if I zoom into the windows, you see the difference, right? If I look at this one to compare, well, now we've got detail in the windows, but still not as much detail. And now there's no detail in here. Okay, so the HDR gives you the best of both worlds. Okay, see how much more tonal range there is captured here. Okay, so this is the perfect kind of scene, and inside looking outside, like when you have windows, to do that with. Okay. Let's see. All right, now I want to show you a pano that I did that was a little bit different. So we talked about shooting images vertically to stitch a horizontal pano. In this example, what I did was, I got to move my camera over. I'm in the wrong place. Here we go. What I did was on this one, I wanted to end up with a vertical image, so I shot horizontally. So this temple, or this, I guess it's a church in Cuba, I took 3 horizontal images, one on top of the other, okay? And then what I did was I merged them into this pano, okay? So I want to show a demonstration in Luminar as well. So let me switch to Luminar. And then, where are we? Okay, there's my Luminar. Okay, so now what I've done here is I pre-merged a bunch because the Luminar version we have now has batch HDR. Okay, so these are all the HDRs that I shot from the cabin that we stayed at. So let me just show you the raw files here. Okay, so these are all the bracketed images. Okay, so what I did was I literally selected all of these, okay, and drag them in here. Okay, so you can put up to 1,000. Okay, can you see where it says up to 1,000? And as soon as I put in a whole bunch, there's 82 photos selected. It knows that I want to do batch HDR. Okay, you can select your settings here for auto alignment, ghost reduction, just like we did in Lightroom. Okay, but when you're doing batch HDR, okay, if you've put in more than one set of images, and this is something that Lightroom does not do. So, hey, Luminar's winning for this one. Okay, so I ran these through here earlier to create those merged 32-bit files by clicking this button. Now, it does take some time, so I'm not going to do that now. That's why I did that ahead of time. Okay, so when you click merge, you'll see a screen that looks like this, and it will show you each set of images. Okay, and you could decide, oh no, I don't want those ones. You can delete them, but see how it's picking up the features, and the bracket is set for each set of images. Pretty cool, right? Okay, now this one, it's picked up that it looks like it's mixing up a few. Okay, so I might X these ones out because it's gonna try to merge those all together, and it's gonna end up with a mess. Okay, so I X those ones out. So just double check. Okay, it's gonna have trouble with these potentially as well. So I might X this set here. Okay, and I'm gonna X this set here. Okay, so I would just merge all of the single ones. Okay. Now, I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that again. When you've completed that step, what it does is it puts them into the folder called HDR Merge, okay? And you can see there they all are. Now they don't look like anything special, but let's look at this one, for example, okay? Or this one. So it's got the windows, remember, same scenario that I just did in the little chart, right? The windows are super bright, right? But keep in mind, okay, so this is HDR, saves it as a TIFF inside of Luminar, right? When I go in here to edit, right? I'm on the wrong tab here. I've got so much information, the same as what I had in Lightroom. Okay, so I can bring the highlights way down. I'm gonna make sure I had enough brightness in there, right? And I can bring the shadows way up. Let me check this other one here. This one here. I think I've got more detail in the windows on this one. Right? You have to, again, make sure you shot enough, because I don't think I shot enough images to make it dark enough on the windows here. So my problem here on that last one was I didn't shoot it dark enough to capture the window detail. See that? So this one here, I can brighten like so. And I'd probably do some masking on the window to work on that separately. Okay, something like that. I'd also warm it up a little bit. Something like that. Okay, so Luminar allows you to do all these batch editing. And then if I'm happy with the edits on this one, I can copy the adjustments, for example, and paste them into any of these others. Okay, so I can just do a copy and paste to bring down the highlights and make those adjustments into all of those. See how that's happening? Oh, I missed one. I can do this one too. I'm doing all sort of the interior ones that look the same. Missed another one. Okay, but look at what a nice job it did here, picking up some of the detail outside the window. Okay. So these are some of the little cabins that we are considering renting for doing the night workshop. I was taking photos in them so that we can share that. This is some of the set that's on site. But look what a great job it did on the windows here of this other angle of the church and picked up the detail outside, right? Okay. Robert was asking about the virtual copies. Yes, it will be in the newer version when they release that in October. Yes. Which one did you mean, Robert? Did I edit this in Neo? I'm always working, Lee. We initially started, just going there because I wanted to do a getaway. It was only an hour and a half away from where we live. And Rob says I made him stop talking about work, but for me, photography is work, but it's not, if that makes sense, right? I mean, I always have my camera with me. So let me know which one you meant, Robert. I've done some sets of images in both, and sometimes I find that Lightroom does a better job, and sometimes I find that Luminar does a better job, right? But let me go back here. Okay, so that is the HDR. Now, while I'm in here, I want to take a look at some pano merging. Okay, so one of the things that you asked me about was, does it merge? These are part of the Luminar course. So you can merge these or some of these. I'm looking for my pano stitching. Where are we? There we go. These are there's one stitched. So there's that same image I showed you of the church that was stitched in Lightroom. I did the same sort of merge here in Luminar. Okay. But I want to do a nice stitch. Can't find my raw files. Where did they go? I am going to add some photos in here because I think I'm in the wrong catalog. Let's see. For pano. There we go. I think these, there we go. I did have them in here. Okay. I just couldn't find my folder. Okay, so let's do a simple pano merge first. And Robert wanted to know if I could do a vertical one. So did you mean like vertical like this, Robert, or the images going vertically? Okay, because it'll do either. Okay, let's do a simple one first. Okay, so I'm just going to remove these images from the HDR module. So when you're doing a pano, right, you want to grab your images and just drop them into the pano extension. If you are using Lightroom and you want to use Luminar as a plugin, you can make it bring your images from Lightroom into here so you can merge them in the extension as well. And I can show you that. Okay. So do we want to do chromatic aberration and all these other things? Sure, let's do that. Okay. And then we're going to start the pano stitching process. Okay, it takes a minute. Now, the neat thing about Luminar is I'll show you the difference in this one, Luminar to Lightroom. I got to get my words correct to make sure I tell you the right program. Is you can choose the projection for each of them. Okay, so the projections are these here as to how it merges the pano. Okay. Think of it like, for example, this is the Mercator or Mercador, I'm not sure how you say that, projection, which is similar to like the maps that we use, okay? But you can also have different options here, okay? With Luminar, we can do things like stretch it and move it around, okay? We don't have that ability in Lightroom. You get what you get, okay? So I can do things like rotate it. Okay, so I'm looking at, you know, my center line here to try and get it to match, things like that. Okay, so you can decide which projection is best for this particular set of images and then adjust it. Okay, so you've got a little bit more options, okay, than you do in Lightroom. Now, this one is interesting because look at how it changed it. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. Okay, look at how that changed the projection. And if we end up cropping it, it's going to crop to here. Okay, so we'll see sort of that table on the patio there versus similar. Okay, so I'm going to go with this one actually because it gives me a bit more sky, right? But I want to make sure that the verticals are looking good here on the side. Okay, that looks good. And then when you go to the next step, you get the cropping. Okay. Now, if I choose to do something like this for cropping, right, I would have to go and use content aware fill or use the generative tools to fill that in. Okay. So that's one thing where Lightroom has the advantage. I'll show you that in a minute for merging a pano. Okay. So I'm not liking that projection after all. I think I kind of liked this one. Let's zoom it up a little bit. I'm trying to get the verticals kind of straight. Let's try something like that. I'm looking at the tower and over here. Okay, let's see how that crops. That looks better. But we're losing this bit at the bottom, okay? So keep in mind that you can expand it, but you'll have to fill those bits in some other way, okay? Same here, okay? So I can expand it, and that's easy enough to fill in these parts of the sky here, okay? But I think this would be more difficult. So we end up looking with something that looks like this, okay? And then you just save it. I'm not going to save it because I've done this one a million times. Well, I'll do it again. Okay, so when you save it, it's going to end up in your folder called Panorama Stitching. Okay, you can see there it is. Okay, and I would have to work on those edges, and you can edit from there. Okay, there's the blue hour one that I did of the same scene. Okay, now let's take a look at the vertical one. Okay, so let's take a look at this one because this one merged quite nicely. Okay, so you can do the same thing, pano stitching, drop it in. I've got those checked off. Let me see. Okay. So Robert's question was about the inside of the cabin. I did the church with Lightroom, and I just did the cabin for you for the first time in Luminar. And I find that for HDR, they're both fairly similar. And it's just a matter of, which software I have to happen to be in. Is the HDR merge folder the same for all catalogs? That's a great question. If you have multiple catalogs, I believe so. But whether or not, I believe the answer is I think so. That's my final answer. I think so. Because it's pointing at they have the same name, and it would drop them into that same folder. Okay. So you already picked up one tip on that. Excellent. All right, so now let's take a look at this one. Okay, so we've got the same options. I want to make sure, that I've got these verticals sort of straight, this part here, okay? And now when I move it sort of side to side, we'll see how it changes, okay, up and down. So I don't want to stretch the top. I want to keep it fairly neutral, like so. And then I'll just have a look. That stretches it a little bit. This little slider thing is really touchy. That one's not bad. And I'm trying to look at, okay, how's it going to crop? See, it's going to crop there, which means I'm going to have to fill in lots of the sky. So I'm watching that sky and going, okay, aha, now look at, see, that to me looks better because I can crop like there and not lose too much of the sky. And look at that. If I adjust it, see that? So always do these adjustments, before you do the crop. I'm happy with that. Okay. Now you can see I don't have the top of the church cropped off. And if I want a little bit more sky, I can just go fill that in with content aware fill or the generative tools. Okay. And then when we get the crop done, okay, there's our final image. And from there, I did more editing on that one. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So you can see I've done this one a few different times, and I'm getting a different result each time based on the projection that I've chosen. Okay. But they're all pretty good. Okay. I think the one we just did was actually pretty good. Right. All right, let's move on to the advanced stuff, which is the HDR panos. But let me come back to Lightroom here. I need to get where are we? Okay, back to Lightroom. Okay, so now what I want to do is show you the HDR and pano merge using the little church, right? So I'm going to start with these images. So I'll show you the 9 that I'm going to use. Oops, apparently I missed that one. So what I do in Lightroom is I color code them so that I know which ones I'm going to grab. And sometimes I'll take a picture of my hand, especially if I'm doing brackets. So if I know I'm doing 3, 3, and 3, then I'll put my hand up first, and then I'll do 3, 3, 3, and then I'll put my hand up again in front of the lens so that I know where my set starts and ends, okay? Because sometimes I confuse myself. Okay, so there's the 9 that I'm going to use. Okay, so I've got 3 on the left, 3 in the middle, and 3 on the right. Okay. And I'm not doing any adjustments on these. Okay. If I wanted to do any adjustments, I could probably take these darkest ones actually and just check for any clipping. Okay, so you can see the darkest one is still clipping the windows. So I could just fake it a little bit. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is just do a copy and just copy the highlights into all of these darker images. So I'm just doing Command V, paste. There we go. Paste. Okay, so now I've just brought the highlights down in those darkest ones, so I'm kind of faking it a little bit darker. Okay. Now, when I right click, okay, photo merge, before I used HDR, okay, panorama we used as well, okay. Now we're going to use the bottom option, which is HDR Panorama. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to show you. Before I do this one, let me just do this real quick. I just want to show you if we do the same one here, the church and Cuba as panorama, I'll just show you that, you know, we looked at this. You have choices of the projections. You have less choices or fewer choices in Lightroom, right? We only have spherical, cylindrical, and perspective, right? You see it's cutting off the top there. That's better. Okay. Oh, it's doing auto crop. That's why. There we go. I had auto crop turned on. I knew there was something going on. Great. So we can see the different projections and the challenges we're going to get. The church looks way taller there. Looks kind of short and squat there. Versus this one, which is just weird. But you see, we don't have, I'm trying to grab it and click. You can't adjust it, okay? So I'm going to go with, I think, this one that makes it look taller. You have this boundary wrap or boundary warp, okay? So Luminar has the advantage in that it has more projections and you have the ability to kind of move it around and choose your crop, okay? Whereas it doesn't fill the edges. Lightroom, you have the option of doing this boundary warp to kind of stretch things and fill the edges. Okay, so it'll use AI or auto generative stuff to fill in the edges. And if we look closely, it's not too bad. Look at it's filling in like some stuff down here. Okay, it's not bad. Okay. And I could bring this up even higher and see if I can just stretch it all the way out, which I can do as well. Okay, so I might leave this fairly high and only fill the edges a little bit, and then I don't have to crop. Okay, or without using the fill, do the crop. Okay, but this gives me more sky above. So again, there's pros and cons of each. Lightroom, you have the ability to fill the edges like this, and it does a really nice job, but you don't have as many projections and you don't have the ability to arrange the cropping. Okay, so each one has pros and cons. All right, let's come back to the church. So there's my 9 images again. I'll come back to your question in a minute, Robert, because I'm in Lightroom right now. Okay, so let's do this one. Photo merge, HDR Pano. Okay, so there's a little message here that's telling me HDR brackets merged with align images on and deghost off. If you need to merge with different settings, merge the HDR brackets individually before merging HDR. Okay, so basically it's saying it's not doing any deghosting. So if we have a ghosting problem where something moved in the image, which didn't in the church, okay, it's suggesting that I do the HDR merge first so that I have more options with the settings, okay? This is taking a while. Come on, come on. There we go. Okay, so now we can choose the projection again. Let's see how it looks. This is also why to take more images, right? I could have actually shot 6 sets of bracketed images, so 24 images instead of just 9. Okay, so I took 3. No, I guess I would have had 18. So I could have taken 6. Yeah, I would have had 18. Okay, so I could have taken 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom, and then I would have had more of the roof and the floor as well. Okay, so this one looks pretty good. Let's see what happens if I warp the edges. I don't want to lose that window on the left. Okay. Let's see what it gives me for auto settings. It's not bad. I find that Lightroom tends to, with the auto settings, I'll leave it on for this one. because I want to show you what I did to make my final version. It's doing some weird things here stitching wise. Can you see that it's sort of got like some overlap? And it doesn't allow me to zoom in this view at all. Like right here and right here, it's not stitching the ceiling brackets perfectly. Okay. Let's see which of these is better. And the auto settings, I'm not crazy about. It usually pushes saturation and vibrance up, which I'm not crazy about. It's doing some weird stuff down here on the floor. It's not perfect either. Right? But I did all of the correct... Ooh, that's no good. It's like stretched. Okay, so that one was the best one. Okay, so that was the best one. And I've already done this merge, so I'm not going to do it again. When I hit merge, it's just going to bring the merged image, merged and stitched image back into Lightroom, which I've already done. So let me just show you that one. Okay, so there's the image as it came back. Okay, so when it comes back into Lightroom, right, we have the ability to edit it. Right, so there's the before and after. So before and after. Okay. And what I did was, like, if you look at the before, okay, can you see here? This is what I fixed. This wasn't lining up very well. Okay, so I used some generative fill to make the beam blend a little better. And likewise here, it didn't blend, and here. So I used some generative things to fill that. And oh, I missed one. See, there's another one there. So you got to look for those little things where it's not merging correctly. Okay, over here on this edge, I didn't like what it did on the floor because it had the log down here. Okay, so I made it blend the floor better. But let me fix that other one that I just saw. Okay, so here's another one. So this is how I would fix that. Okay, so I'm going to use I'm going to try non-generative first. And I'm just going to select this to see if it does a good job. I find this one doesn't do so great. Right? So I'm going to use generative. And it's going to generate 3 options for me using AI generative tools. So it is using the cloud. Okay, but see how great job it does of detecting the fact that I want that baseboard straight. Okay. And now I'm just clicking 3 here. So that's a good choice. Okay, so can you see what it's doing? And that's this kind of thing that you want to look for when you're stitching your pano that will give it away. Okay, so you can see what I've done with the merges. Fixed all of the lines to make sure they line up correctly. Okay, I fixed another one there. Okay. But Lightroom did a really good job on the edges other than this bottom corner. Okay. Let's do the same one in Luminar. Okay, where's my... Okay, so here is the same files, the same 9. Okay, now remember, if I'm going to do HDR Pano in Luminar, I have to drop it into Pano. Okay, so here I'm dropping it in. Okay, now I have the options here for the choices I had before for Pano, but also I have alignment and ghost reduction. Okay, now I'm not going to do ghost reduction because nothing moved from one scene to the other. Okay, so I'm not worried about that, but these are options for HDR. Okay, and it knows that I'm doing HDR. Okay, so I'm going to click start. So this is the problem that I had merging this one a moment ago. I tried doing this one in Luminar previously and it didn't like it. It didn't want to merge these. So you see, it thinks that these 6 are all the same image. Okay. So it should be picking up this one, and this one separately, and it's not. Okay. So we could go to the HDR merged ones. Where are we? Because I merged those bracketed ones, I think. Or did I? No, I didn't. Okay, so I can come back here and merge the brackets first. So in this case, as you can see, Lightroom has won this challenge because I'm just going to do a batch HDR on these 3 sets. It still doesn't want to pick up these images, right? So it does not want to batch these. So I'm going to dump these. The right ones look okay. So I'm going to merge those. On another challenge I did, which I'll show you, which was a pano HDR I did in Portugal of the sunset, similar to the one I showed you with the man. Lightroom failed on every attempt and Luminar did. So having multiple tools in your toolbox is actually really helpful. Okay, I can come back to your question now, Robert. I find that clicking on Find in Folder that the HDR Pano, etc. are saved in my Pictures folder on your Mac. And asking Skylum, they say that presently you're not able to move them anywhere. Well, yes and no. That's the default folder, but once they're in there, you can move them. Is my audio out of sync again? Am I synced? Sync. Sync. How's that? Okay, so here we are. It's merged that one. So this is what I mean. Okay, so it's merged this one, okay, and it's now in the HDR merge, which is in my Pictures folder. But if you want, you can move any of these. Like I could drag all of these into where the raw files are. Yeah, I was out of sync again, wasn't I? Okay, I'm going to try doing these one set at a time. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to merge this set. And then I'll merge the middle set. So unfortunately, it didn't like all 9 images, whereas Lightroom did. Okay, so I was able to do the HDR Pano in one step. Luminar didn't recognize it, and that could be my fault for not overlapping enough, okay, that it's not picking them up. So I could have taken 4 sets instead of 3 sets, okay. Now I'm back synced again. Yeah, I don't know why it's going out of sync. That's weird, but you have to let me know. Okay, there's the second set and one more. Where's the middle set? Here's the middle set. There we go. And then from there, I should be able to take the merged ones and drop them into Pano. Now, if I want to do any editing on them, I recommend doing all the stitching and merging first and then do your editing, okay? Because these are going to be TIFF files, so they're fairly big and they carry lots of data, right? These merged HDR files, they will be able to do the same with, because I'm not sure if you drop them into Pano if it merges with the edits or not. I haven't tested that theory. So it'll be an interesting test though. I would do the merging and then do the editing. Okay, so there's my 3 images. Let's see if it will recognize them now. Okay, because it had trouble with them before. Okay, so finding key points. Here we go. All right, so now it's recognizing them. Okay, that looks pretty good. Like I want to make sure that the verticals are straight, so I'm kind of want to play around with that a little bit, see if I can get a better projection. That looks crooked. Yeah, one of them will let you grab the corner. Let's try. Why won't it let me do the rotate now? I rarely use that one. Yeah, it won't let me grab the corner now. Interesting. Well, let's see how that crops. So again, we have the disadvantage here of not being able to fill in the edges, right? So if I want to maintain, I'm going to end up with something that looks like that with the missing bits. Okay, so it's done a decent job, but it didn't pick up the 9 images and merge and HDR at the same time, and we don't get the edges filled. So again, in this battle, Lightroom won. Okay, the one that Luminar won is, where is it? Pano. This one, right? I've done this one multiple times in Lightroom, and I've tried to merge it, and it never comes out as I want it. And the images I'll show you are in Lightroom. Okay, so this one is, I believe, I can't even remember how many images I shot. This one here. Okay, so here's the images, and I shot them vertically. So the final edited version, see in Lightroom, it's giving me one that is 7,800 pixels wide. Okay, but let me switch back to Luminar because you'll see how much data it's missing. Okay, pay attention to where it ends on the left and the right. Okay, let me just switch back to Luminar. Can you see the difference? There's more information in the Luminar one, I think. Okay. So if I take these and I shot them vertically, okay, like I said, and I shot more than I needed, okay. Now I'm just going to move these around because what I did was I tried to get Luminar, or I tried to get Lightroom to stitch all of them, and it wouldn't do it. Okay, because see how it's missing part on the left. Oh yes, it did pick it up this time. This was my first attempt in Lightroom. Okay, this one was better, so these ones are much better. Okay, and closer to what I got out of Luminar, but the original Lightroom merge, it was not taking into account this entire panel on the left. Okay, so this is the 3 sort of scenes that I bracketed. Right, so these are the HDR, these are HDR images that I bracketed, right? The first scene, second scene, third scene. You can see the overlap. There's the sun, okay? And this one here, you can see sort of this little valley, and that's over here. Okay, so I've got plenty of overlap, and these are, I took 5 images of each scene, okay? So you can see those are my brackets, right? And I wanted to make sure that I had enough, okay? So again, take more than you need. And I ended up not using the brightest ones because I just felt that they were just overexposed and I don't need them, okay? So that's why they're not marked with red, okay? So I'm just going to show the red ones, okay? So I end up with, oops, there's the darkest one. I end up with 12 bracketed images, okay, that I'm going to take and try and do pano merge with. Okay, so let's try that. So again, HDR Pano, and let's see how it does. So it did a good job on the cabin. Let's see if it does a good job on this one. And this is a tricky one because, again, there's lots of detail. I could have taken more shots. I only did 3. I could have done 4 or 5 like I did with the Grand Canyon. So I broke my own rule. Any questions? How are you liking this? Do we give it a thumbs up? Give the video a thumbs up? I'm out of sync again. I don't know why it's not syncing. Robert says, it would be nice if Neo colored the photos used. So the ratings are coming into the new version of Luminar. I don't know about colored, but I believe you'll be able to rate them. So it's not something they originally planned on doing in Luminar. So fingers crossed. I do not know why my audio is messed up. Sound. Testing, testing. Let me just test and see. I'm going to check something. See if that's, is that any better? Better? Testing, testing. Now there's just a delay. Is that better? I don't know. Am I delayed video? Am I delayed everything? Stephanie says, I've done HDR and I've done panos, but I've never done the same thing. Now I know how to process them. There you go. David says, definitely learned a couple of things. This is a good one. Thanks, David. Nope, nope, nope. Nope meaning what? Am I out of sync, in sync, delayed? And see, this is what Lightroom says. Unable to merge them. Okay, so it doesn't like these images. I've tried to merge these ones multiple times. Let's try a different. Okay, so let's see if I take off the darkest ones as well. Okay. So now, hang on. Actually, so I think that's why I merged these, because then I tried to put these together. So I did the HDR merge to these ones because Lightroom will not do the HDR pano. Right? Unable to detect. Oh, because I did the wrong thing. Let's just do pano. Okay, so these are the HDR, already HDR'd and merged images. Now let's see if it will do a pano. Out of sync. Now I'm good? Okay. I'm good. Testing. Okay, let's see what we got. So is it giving me, ooh, see, that's weird. And it won't let me do anything with that. Unable to merge them as perspective. So really, I mean, I have two choices, this one or this one. And the first one is weird, but it won't let me, let's see. See, this is kind of what Luminar is doing. It's stretching it with this, but we have the fill edges. Oh, see now what happened? I clicked fill edges and now it won't do anything. Well, that's interesting. That doesn't look anything like what the scene looks like. It should be a horizontal image, right? So it's having a lot of trouble with these images, as you can see. Okay, but when I did the same images, let's see if it does a better job in Luminar. Okay, let's go back to Luminar. Where are my images? I gotta find them. I can do a search. I need to find Portugal. Where are we? Where's my search? They're going to have a better search available as well in the new Luminar. Okay, so there's my brackets. Okay, so I'm going to delete these ones. Okay, so I want to get this one, this one, this one, this one. And then I need this one, this one. This has got the path. Is that 3 or 4? What have I got here? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I feel like I'm missing an image here. Sort them by. There we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. For some reason, I seem to be missing one in the middle here, but let's see what happens. You can see all of the various merges that I've done here with this one. I've done this one multiple times because I've been testing with it. Okay, let's see. Okay, now look at that. So it recognizes looks the same. The sun's over on the right, sun's over on the left, and then just a little hill. Okay, so now we should get a merged Pano HDR. So you see that, again, sometimes Lightroom wins and sometimes Luminar wins, because Lightroom did a terrible job at merging those. Like, it just didn't recognize them at all. Lee's trying to figure out why I get different results each time I redo the pano, because there's settings that you can choose that will dictate the look of the image, right? So I'm choosing a different projection, maybe I'm cropping it differently, arranging it differently. So it has to do with the settings, because it's not just click and go, right? I have choices. Sorry for a little off-topic subject. When you click off the HDR photo, etc., photos back to the originals, you go to the top of the catalog and you have to hunt for the photos you used. I'm not sure what you mean. I was looking for my originals because I don't use Lightroom as I don't use Luminar as my main catalog, Robert. So I've only put in a few of them, right? So the ones that I was looking for, I wasn't sure what folder I put them in. And it's been a while since I found them, so I was just able to do a search for Portugal and found them that way. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Great. So trying to align them based on these 12 images that I dumped in there. Okay. Let me see if how's my sound now? Am I out of sync again? I'm still trying to figure out the audio because I have a new microphone as well. Still thinking about it. Okay. Any other questions while I'm waiting for Luminar to try and merge? I can show you some other examples. We can pop back. Oh, I literally just went to Lightroom and now it's back. There we go. Okay, so now you can see that it did merge that. So this is why I get different results, Lee, because I can do things like twist it around, okay? Adjust it this way. I can choose the different projections. Okay, so I may have chosen a different setting here. I may have pushed it up or down. I may have rotated it a little bit, right? See, this one looks crooked to me. I want to make sure the horizon kind of doesn't look like this is a mountain, right? But I shouldn't have the horizon like be crooked, because this is the horizon, right? It shouldn't be, oops. It shouldn't be tilted or curved so much. So I'm trying to get it so that the horizon isn't doing a weird thing. Let's try something like that. I think something like this crop here, right? And this may be completely different, but look at the difference we get in Luminar compared to Lightroom. Lightroom couldn't even figure out that they were to be merged. Okay. So yeah, you can see all the different options, all the different times that I've merged this. Okay, so that looks like I use generative fill here to fill in the sky. So I started with this one, and you can see by the file name that it's generative fill. Okay, there's another option. There's another option, another option. Okay, so I've done this one multiple times. I've done this one multiple times as well. Okay, so all my example images I've done several different times. Let's see. Is there anything else that I have missed? I've got another one that I've got for that I shot in Vietnam. Let me go to Lightroom, because this one's kind of neat as well. It's a sunset. Okay, now here's one where I did shoot horizontally and merged it. So I shot, I'll just show you a few of my examples. Okay. Okay, so you could see Those are the images that I shot, right? And I merged it into that one. Okay. At some point, I actually merged them and put in a sailboat. There's a different merge. This one I showed you already. Let's see if I've done any others. And that's it for panel merges. Okay. So let me show you the Vietnam set. Okay. So here's another one where I've done a set of images or multiple sets. Okay. So I've done 5 image brackets on top and bottom. Okay. Because I wanted to get the sky and sort of the greenery below, which is the rice fields in Vietnam. And I ended up not using the brightest ones. And I think I ended up not using the darkest ones either. So I ended up just using 6. But again, take more. And you can always choose not to use them, right? Because the one is basically black. So I put HDR Pano Merge. You can see the little dialog box up at the top. Okay. And we wait. Yes, I'm seeing that I'm going in and out of sync. I think we're having pizza for dinner tonight, are we not, Rob? So if you want to go ahead and order pizza, we're almost done here. Okay, so again, this is Lightroom, and you can see that it's now merging. Try the different projection. And let's warp it. So the warp kind of is like stretch, okay? So it's like stretching. Let's see what happens if we fill the edges. And again, this is taking some time, but I've got Luminar open. I've got Lightroom open. I have the program that I'm streaming with, my audio program, and another one that I'm communicating with Rob with on the side. Okay, so your computer may not get as bogged down as what I'm getting right now because of how many things that I have operating. Okay, so now I've just selected yes, and it's going to give me a new image. You can see right here that it's merging it. I don't know why. I have Xire search, and every time I make a new merged image, it wants to search it and scan it. Okay, but then the merged image, where did it go? Where did it go? Oh, still creating it. Still creating HDR Pano. If you find that once you do this process, if your HDR merge or your Pano merge is missing or you can't find it, check how your images are sorted, okay? Because if you have them sorted, for example, by added order, what's going to happen is it's going to go to the bottom, okay? So this is in a collection. I have a collection of images for today, but as soon as it creates this image, it's going to add it to the collection and it's going to be at the bottom. Wait for it. Wait for it. No, it made a liar of me. Maybe it's at the top. Okay, let me just try. Okay, custom order. If we go added order, it's still not putting it where I thought. Okay, so I'm not finding where the heck is it? Where the heck is it? Anyways, I don't know why it's doing that. Let's sort by file name. So if you cannot find your merged Pano or your merged HDR, sort by file name, and it should be right next to it. There it is. Okay. Now I'm going to mark that one as red so I know that's a Pano, and I can continue editing from here as I did with the other HDR. Okay, so just like the other one, I've got lots of data to work with. So even though it's kind of going off the chart, we've got lots more information to work with here. Okay, and you can do things like mask the sky as well. I would get rid of this tree up at the top. Right, maybe warm it up a little bit because it feels kind of cool. Let's darken the whole thing. See, look at that sky. Look at that sky. So I'm just going to do a quick select up to here. And let's just brighten the landscape, right? Now, if I want to make sure that it's getting the hills here, I can just say, okay, I want to add objects. And I'm just going to make sure it gets the hill on this side. Let's do the mask. I have my mask on Lightroom set right now to show like this. Okay. Yeah, that's a weird thing. I don't know why it did that. Let's delete that. Let's try again. Okay, so I've just got the radial or the linear gradient here. Okay. And I'm going to add the luminance range. So I just want to use these dark trees here. Right. I just want the dark, dark, dark. There we go. See that? Now it's getting a bit of the sky, which is maybe okay. Okay, so I'm lightening things a little bit. Giving it some contrast. Let's give it some texture in the foreground. Make the foreground warmer. There we go. Okay, so now I'm getting close to how I would like this image. A little more masking up here. Get rid of this tree and so on. Okay. Look at that. Double image. Okay. So that was probably due to ghosting. When I shot the brackets, the tree probably moved because I shot this on a tripod. And I do not want generative fill, so let's try that again. This one should do a pretty good job without generative fill because it's just going to fill it with blue. Yep. Okay, so I always try non-generative fill first. Like that. Piece of cake. Okay, so there's a quick before and after. Let's give it a little more punch. Okay, and something like that. Okay, so that one did a great job of the stacking one on top of the other. Okay. Let's see. Here's another one where I did a similar one. This is just HDR. We had a beautiful sunrise that day over the Sapa Valley. Right. Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean, Robert. In Lightroom, does it color the photos when you select them? Do you mean like the color label, like red, blue, green? That's a function of Lightroom that Luminar does not have. It's a color label, right? So these things here. It is fun to play with things, right? And people that say, there's the purists that don't edit their photos at all. And they will say, we need to have it captured in camera perfectly. But how can you capture a pano? Or how can you capture a scene if your lens isn't wide enough, right? And is it truly capturing reality if you're using a fisheye lens? No. So manipulating things in the computer sometimes actually brings things back closer to what we saw with our eye than what the camera sees, right? Because when we look at things with our eye, especially high dynamic range things, we see the full range, right? We see the dark shadows have detail, and we see outside the window that has full detail because your eyes can adjust in a split second. It's not that we have super high, super great, eyesight, right? And Rob is saying that our Cuba tour is sold out, which it is. We sold 2 spots last night, and our Cuba tour and our Japan tour are sold out. We may have some spots open for Japan. So if you're interested on that one, get on the wait list, because we've had somebody that may have to cancel for an emergency, something that they are dealing with. But again, this is still 6 months off. So 6 months down the road. But if you're interested in either of those, get on the wait list. The color label is what you were asking about. Yeah, so that's a function of Lightroom. That's not something that Luminar has. Is there anything that I did not cover? Have I missed anything? I'm back. My office assistant is still here. Look, here she is. There she is. Oops, can you see her? No, she's gotta go over there. Can you see her? Nope, it's got to be without my lower third. There she is. Much. There you are. There you go. She's my background now. Any other questions about HDR panos? Another Zoom meeting for tonight, Stephanie. You are a busy, busy girl. I'm so glad you learned a ton. Am I in sync or out of sync again? Hey, Lee knows that it's punch. Yay. Any other questions? I feel like I need some music or something. I feel naked without music. No, we don't want that one. How about this? All right. I'm out of sync, David says. I don't know. I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit further. I don't know. Something I've got set is changing the audio. Okay, let's see. I changed it. All right, test. Great session today, Deb. Thanks. Lots of great information. You're so welcome. Lee, I learned a bunch. Photos from Pigeon Forge 2 weeks ago to try. Awesome. Awesome. All right. I'd love to see those in the community. For those of you who are in the community, please remember to go and vote on the photography challenge. And again, if you are not a member of the community, Rob, if you want to share a link to that, it's open for another 88 members or something. And you will also get access to the... Somebody's car outside is making a noise. You will also get access to the night webinar. Yeah, see, Munch heard it too. So check out the community if you'd like to join. Most of these people who are commenting tonight are members of the Digital Photo Mentor community, which is private off of Facebook. And the feedback that we're getting is that they like it because it is safe, it is secure, and it is non-political, non-religious, non-harsh opinion. Okay, so it's a nice place to come to share your images and to grow. So the whole idea behind the community is to push you forward to better your photography and whatever that looks like for you. Right? Links in the description for the community. While people who are watching live, though, to give them the link. So that's all. So people who are watching live, if you could please give them the link to the night webinar and the community. And if you want access to both, join the community. Okay, so for 3 months membership, it's only $27 versus the webinar that's currently on for $19. So you can get just the webinar for $19 or join it for 3 months in the community and get tons more stuff, including 2 past webinars and a course for that price. So I am going to sign off here. I just need to find my end screen. There we go. So thanks for joining us this week. I appreciate you for sticking with me for an hour and a half learning about HDR, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So I'll have a new topic for you shortly. Take care and have a great week.